What did a Roman bathhouse really feel like? Not the movie version, no marble luxury, no perfume. Just a modest place in a provincial town where tired bodies followed the same familiar routine: warmth, water, and a slow shift into evening. In this series, we have been moving through the Roman day as it was actually lived. Not through rulers and battles, but through habits, through light, sound, and ordinary tasks that repeated often enough to become familiar. A bathhouse fits here naturally because it wasn't a special occasion. For many people, it was one of the ways a day learned how to end. A Roman bath was not a treat in the modern sense. It was closer to maintenance, a way to loosen a body after work, a way to rinse off dust and sweat, a way to spend time in warmth when the air outside began to cool. Even when it was social, it still began as something physical and practical. In a provincial town, the bathhouse was not designed to impress. It was designed to work: stone walls that held heat, floors that stayed damp, a few simple rooms that guided you forward, one step at a time. You did not need to know the hour to arrive there. You came when the day had reached a certain feeling. Maybe the work outside had slowed. Maybe the market had thinned. Maybe tools had been set down and the body had begun to notice itself again. The bathhouse did not create that transition. It received it. It was one of the places where the Roman day could change texture without a sharp line. You can imagine the approach before you even enter. A street that still holds warmth from the afternoon sun. A doorway that does not look dramatic, just familiar. A small flow of people moving in and out, not rushed, not ceremonial. It is ordinary enough that no one announces it. It is simply where people go. Inside, the air feels different, not thick with steam like a modern spa, and not scented, more like a gentle shift in temperature. A warmth that sits in the stone, a faint dampness in the surfaces. You feel it as soon as you step away from the open street. Sound changes too, not silence, but a different kind of sound. Footsteps soften on worn floors, voices echo slightly in enclosed rooms, water makes small noises that repeat: a pour, a splash, a quiet movement in a basin. The bathhouse does not replace the sound of the town. It gathers it and reshapes it. Light also behaves differently here. In a modest bathhouse, there is no bright, open interior. Light enters where it can, through a doorway, through a small opening, through a change in angle as you pass from one space to another. It becomes filtered and contained, and it makes the rooms feel slower. This is one reason baths fit into a series about rhythm. A bathhouse is a place built for gradual change. You do not go from outside to full heat instantly. You move through stages, you adjust. Your body learns the environment step by step, the way the day itself softened toward evening. And that gradualness matters, especially in a world without modern schedules. The bathhouse did not need a reservation. It did not need a start time. People arrived in overlapping waves, guided by routine and habit. The experience did not depend on precision. It depended on repetition. For many Romans, the bath also carried a social layer, but not always in a loud or theatrical way. You might see a neighbor, you might exchange a few words, you might simply be near other bodies doing the same quiet sequence. Togetherness was often a byproduct of shared routine, not a planned event. In a modest provincial bathhouse, the crowd was not endless. It was familiar. Faces you have seen before, even if you do not know their names well. Bodies moving through a place they already understand. No one needs a tour. No one needs instructions. The building itself tells you what comes next. That is the mood we are entering in this episode. Not spectacle, but atmosphere. Not luxury, but physical detail. Warm stone and cooler air. A slight echo, a steady rhythm of movement. A routine that helps an active day release its grip. Because the Roman day did not end with a modern signal, there was no moment when everyone agreed it was evening and switched modes together. the day simply began to ask less from the body. The bathhouse, for many people, was one of the ways that easing became real. You do not go there to chase excitement. You go there to shift state, to move from dust to water, from tension to warmth, from public movement to something more contained. Even if you return home afterward, you return slightly changed, not transformed, just softened. Imagine standing at the threshold of a modest bathhouse. The street behind you still holds late light. The air inside feels warmer and slightly damp. The sounds are contained but continuous. Nothing dramatic happens. Nothing announces itself. The day simply begins to slow down in a place that was built to help it happen. That slowing is part of why baths mattered in the first place. They were not built to create a special mood. They were built to serve a repeated need in a world where the body collected dust, sweat, and fatigue as naturally as it collected ours. When you stepped into that warmer air, you were entering something closer to infrastructure than indulgence. The bathhouse was not trying to impress you. It was simply there, doing the same job again and again. For many Romans, a bathhouse was not a luxury destination. It was one of the ordinary systems that made daily life workable. In the same way that streets, fountains, markets, and workshops shaped a town's rhythm, the baths helped manage the physical reality of daily living. People worked with their hands. They moved through dusty streets. They lived close to cooking smoke, rough stone, and the residue of ordinary work. And the bathhouse offered a predictable way to release what the day left on the body. It helps to start with something simple. Clean did not mean what it means now. In a modern routine, cleanliness is tied to daily showers, soaps, and private bathrooms. In a Roman routine, the body was cleaned differently and often in a different place. Sweat was expected. Dust was expected. The feeling of a day on the skin was not treated as a failure, only as something normal that became uncomfortable if it stayed too long. Most people did not step under running water each morning. Water existed, but it was carried, fetched, portioned, and used with care. A quick rinse at home might happen in a basin, but it was not the same as a full wash. The bathhouse, by contrast, offered a place where water and heat could be used more generously. Cleaning could include warmth, scraping, and gradual loosening rather than a fast rinse. The process was slower and it matched the pace of the world. Romans also encountered different kinds of dirt than we often picture. Even a provincial town had unpaved patches, wind-blown grit, soot from cooking fires, and the quiet residue of everyday labor. By late afternoon, the body could feel coated, not dramatically but steadily. So a bath was not only about looking presentable, it was about feeling less burdened by the day. It was a way to make the body feel lighter again, without needing sleep first. Heat mattered for that. Warmth helped muscles release. Warm air made the skin feel different, and the body that had been tight with effort could become softer. This did not happen because of luxury. It happened because heat changes how fatigue feels. In that sense, the bathhouse helped evening arrive in the body even before it arrived fully in the sky. Who went to the baths depended on place, income, habits, and access. In a large city, public baths could be part of a common routine because bathhouses were more numerous and the culture around them was more developed. In a provincial town, the bathhouse might still be central, but usage could vary more. Some people went frequently, some went occasionally, some went when work or weather made it feel necessary, and some mainly when it fit the household rhythm. The important point is that bathing was not reserved for an elite minority in the way people sometimes assume. Public and semi-public bathhouses were used by many ordinary people, especially in towns with established Roman infrastructure. Access could involve a small fee and still depended on local conditions, but the bathhouse was often a shared facility, not a private privilege. At the same time, it would be inaccurate to imagine a single uniform pattern. Frequency was not a fixed rule. Some Romans might bathe daily when it was convenient, others less often depending on workload, distance, cost, personal preference, or season. For some, it was an after-work habit. For others, it was something done when the body felt especially heavy, when the day had been especially dusty, or when the household routine allowed the time. The decision could be practical, not symbolic. That variability is part of what makes baths fit a series about rhythm rather than schedule. People did not go because it was 6 o'clock. They went because the day had moved into a certain phase, and the body wanted warmth. Work was easing. The heat outside was changing. Hunger might be present, but not urgent, and the bathhouse met that condition without requiring precision. It offered a steady transition rather than a timed appointment. Bathing was also shaped by the fact that Roman homes were not built like modern homes. Many ordinary households did not have large private bathing rooms designed for comfort and privacy. Even when some washing happened at home, it was often partial and practical. So the bathhouse offered something different. Not a perfect private experience, but a reliable sequence that the home could not easily provide. The value was not privacy, it was consistency. That sequence is one of the most important things to understand. A Roman bathhouse, even a modest one, was organized in a familiar order. The architecture guided the body through stages in a way you did not need to think about. You moved from one room into another with a logic you could feel. It was the same each time, or close enough that the body recognized it. This is why the bathhouse could feel calm even when it was social. In a world where so much was variable, weather, work demands, household needs, the bathhouse offered something stable. The same kind of doorway, the same floor underfoot, the same shift in temperature as you moved deeper inside, the same echo and the same dampness on stone. Even if the people present changed, the building remained consistent. It did not surprise you, it received you. This predictability also shaped the social atmosphere. A bathhouse was not necessarily loud entertainment, especially in a smaller town. It could be a place where conversation happened naturally, but it could also be a place where people simply coexisted. When bodies follow the same routine in the same spaces, they do not need to invent interaction. Presence becomes enough. You might exchange a few words, then fall into silence without awkwardness, because the sequence carries you forward. And baths were not only about washing in the narrow sense. Romans often cleaned the body with oil and scraping, not only with water, and the goal was relief rather than modern freshness. Dirt and sweat were loosened, lifted, and removed through repeated steps, and heat made that easier. Warmth opened the skin's surface. Water helped carry away what the day had left behind. The result was not a perfume-like finish, but a lighter body and a quieter feeling. That relief mattered even more when the day had been long, or when the body had been doing repetitive labor. A bathhouse could function like a reset without requiring sleep. Muscles softened, the mind became quieter, and the body shifted from effort into recovery. This is why baths often sat naturally in the late-day rhythm. They belonged to the zone where activity declined, but the evening had not fully settled. They were a bridge between the day's weight and the night's ease. Even the sensory details support that. Warm stone can feel steady underfoot, different from street dust. Air with gentle moisture can feel kinder to a tired throat, and small echoes can make movement feel slower. Light entering through limited openings can make time feel less sharp. These are not luxuries in the modern sense. They are environmental cues that tell the nervous system it can reduce effort. So when we say baths mattered beyond luxury, we mean they mattered because they fit the body's needs in an ordinary world. They helped people manage work and movement without modern washing habits. They offered warmth, sequence, and predictability without requiring private space. And that brings us back to the threshold where we ended the intro. The street behind you still holds late light, and the air inside feels warmer, and slightly damp. The sounds are contained, but continuous, and nothing announces itself. That lack of announcement is the key. The bathhouse does not perform importance. It simply exists as one of the places where the day can slow down on purpose. From here, the routine begins in the most ordinary way possible, by crossing a threshold. You leave the open street with its changing light and uneven sounds, and you enter a space that has been built to hold the body in a different rhythm. The change is not dramatic, but it is immediate. Outside, air moves freely and carries whatever the town is doing. Inside, air feels contained. Stone and plaster hold temperature longer, and the bathhouse has its own steady atmosphere, shaped by heat, moisture, and repetition. Even before you see anything clearly, you can often hear that you are no longer in the street. Sound behaves differently here. It does not scatter, it gathers. Footsteps land with a slightly heavier echo. Voices become closer, even when they are low. Somewhere deeper inside, water makes a quiet, continuous sound that does not demand attention, but never fully disappears. This is one of the first reasons the bathhouse can feel calm. Not because it is silent, but because it is predictable. The building returns the same kinds of sounds each time, and the nervous system begins to recognize them as part of a familiar sequence. In a small-town bathhouse, the entrance is functional. You are not arriving at a grand ceremonial doorway. You are entering a practical place that many other bodies have entered day after day, with the same tiredness and the same expectation of relief. The first spaces often feel like a buffer between outside life and the interior routine. Light is still present, but softened. The bright contrast of the street becomes gentler because openings are smaller and because walls hold shadow longer. This matters for pace. Outside, the eye is constantly adjusting to movement and distance. Inside, the eye settles. The environment gives you fewer things to track at once, and that reduces effort without any conscious decision. As you move inward, you reach the area where the body begins to be managed more deliberately. In many bathhouses, this is the apoditarium, the changing room. Even in a simple complex, there is usually a space where people pause, handle belongings, and shift from street mode into the bathhouse sequence. The apoditarium does not have to be ornate to do its job. It needs surfaces, it needs places to sit, it needs hooks, shelves, or ledges where clothing can be placed, and where small items can be kept close. You can imagine the practical gestures here: a cloak folded and set down, sandals removed, a belt loosened, small objects placed carefully, because losing them would be inconvenient, and because the bathhouse is shared space. This is not a moment of luxury. It is a moment of routine. Bodies do what they have done before and what they have seen others do without needing instruction. If there are attendants in this bathhouse, they are not theatrical. They are part of the infrastructure, like the building itself. They might help watch belongings, carry something, or guide newcomers, but most people likely know the steps already. In a provincial town, the atmosphere here can be less performative than the movie version suggests. People are not arriving to be seen. They are arriving to follow a sequence that makes the body feel better. The changing room is also where you feel the social reality of bathing most clearly. Not because everyone is talking, but because you are no longer alone in the way you might be at home. There are other bodies moving through the same process. This shared presence shapes behavior naturally. Movements are slightly more careful. Objects are handled with more attention. Voices soften, not because silence is demanded, but because the environment encourages it. Stone amplifies sound, so people learn to keep their voices lower. When you speak quietly in a space that echoes, you still hear yourself. You do not need volume to be heard, and because the sequence is familiar, conversation does not need to fill the air. There is no awkwardness in silence because everyone is doing something. Presence has a purpose, and the steps carry the atmosphere forward. Even the smells are different here. Outside, the town smells like dust, cooking smoke, animals, and whatever the street holds. Inside, the air begins to carry moisture, warm stone, and the faint scent of oils or bodies that have moved through this space before. It is not perfume. It is simply the smell of a place that holds heat and human presence. In a small bathhouse, you might also notice soot from the heating system, especially in areas closer to the furnace side of the complex. This is another reason calm feels different here. Calm is not cleanliness in a modern sense. It is not sterile. It is not perfect. It is the feeling that the environment behaves the same way each time, and that nothing surprising is about to happen. In the apoditarium, the rhythm of time starts to change. Outside, the day is still moving, and the street can feel like it is pulling you forward. Inside, there is no need to hurry. No one is checking a clock. No one is trying to maximize minutes. People move at the pace the space allows, and the space is designed for a slower sequence. Even waiting feels different. If you pause to adjust something or to find a place for your belongings, the pause does not feel like delay. It feels like part of the routine because everyone pauses here. This is an important part of Roman public life in general, and bathhouses show it clearly. Not everything is optimized, not everything is rushed. A shared facility creates shared pacing. The soundscape supports that. You might hear low conversation in fragments, not continuous talk. You might hear the soft scrape of a bench as someone sits. You might hear sandals placed down, fabric shifting, a small cough, a quiet laugh that fades quickly. And underneath it there is usually the steady presence of water. Not a dramatic splash, but the suggestion of it, like a background layer. Water being poured. Water moving through channels. Water collecting in a basin. Sometimes you can hear it without seeing it, and that makes it feel more like environment than event. The sound becomes part of the building's identity, like the echo of steps on stone. From the changing room, the next threshold is often the start of the interior sequence, where temperature becomes the main guide. The deeper you go, the more the bathhouse is defined by heat gradients. This is where the body begins to respond without needing thought. Skin notices warmth. Breathing changes slightly. Muscles that were tight begin to loosen, not because you decide they should, but because the air and surfaces invite it. In a modest bathhouse, the architecture guiding this shift does not need to be grand. It can be a simple doorway into a warmer corridor. It can be a room that holds heat better than the previous one. The effect is still real. And the effect is cumulative. Each small threshold deepens the separation from the street. You move from the open unpredictability of town life into an interior world where the order of rooms creates the order of experience. This is why the calm here is not the calm of silence. It is the calm of sequence. The bathhouse does not ask the mind to rest. It gives the body an environment where resting becomes easier. Predictability is what makes the social aspect feel manageable. When you know what comes next, you do not need to stay alert. You do not need to interpret every sound. You do not need to monitor every person. You can simply be present. You can let the routine carry you because the routine is larger than any one conversation or any one moment. Even if the bathhouse is busier on some days than others, the building still behaves in the same way. The floor is still stone. The echo is still there. The air is still warmer than outside. The steps are still the steps. That consistency makes a shared space feel private in a different sense. Not private as in alone, but private as in contained. The outside world can exist beyond the walls without entering fully into your body. You begin to understand why people might come here not only to clean, but to transition. The bathhouse is a buffer between effort and rest. It is a place where the day can change direction without needing a formal signal. And all of that begins with very simple actions at the threshold. Folding cloth, setting down belongings, hearing your footsteps change, feeling air that is warmer and slightly damp. So as we move forward, we do not need to imagine anything dramatic. We simply follow the sequence deeper, letting each doorway and each change in temperature do its quiet work. From the apoditarium, we can begin to step into the first stages of the bathhouse routine itself, where warmth becomes more intentional and where the body starts to shift from the day's outer layer into something softer, slower, and easier to carry. Once you leave the changing room behind, the bathhouse begins to guide you with something that does not need words. Temperature becomes the main instruction. You are no longer just in a building, you are in a gradual path that the body understands immediately. A Roman bath, even a modest one, is not one room where you wash. It is a sequence that moves you through different kinds of warmth, different kinds of air, and different kinds of stillness. The architecture is designed to do this reliably, so your body can follow without needing to plan anything. In modern life, we often think of heat as something we turn on and off. In the bathhouse, heat is something you enter. It surrounds you in levels. It increases slowly, then eases away. It teaches the body a new pace simply by changing what the skin and breath feel. You might begin in a room that is gently warm, not hot. The air here feels held. It is calmer than the street and calmer than the changing room, but it does not overwhelm you. This is the kind of warmth that allows you to settle in rather than brace. Some bathhouses had names for these rooms, and historians use those names like tepidarium, caldarium, and frigidarium. But you do not need to hold the terms tightly. The important thing is the logic behind them. The bath is a temperature journey. First, the body meets warmth that feels safe and gradual. Then, it meets heat that feels deeper and more intense. Later, it meets coolness that resets the surface again. The rooms exist to create that arc, and most people would have understood it through sensation rather than vocabulary. In that first warm space, you notice small changes. Your shoulders loosen a little. Your jaw unclenches without being told. The skin stops feeling tight the way it can after a day of wind, dust, or effort. Your breathing becomes smoother simply because the air is gentler. This early warmth also changes how time feels. Outside, time is often tracked by movement. You walk somewhere, you finish something, you cross a street. Inside, time is tracked by how the body responds. You do not ask what minute it is. You wait until your breath changes, until your skin adapts, until the warmth feels normal. That adaptation is not instant. It takes a little while, and that is part of the bath's effect. The bathhouse allows you to be in transition without treating transition as wasted time. You are not delaying anything, you are moving through a sequence that requires patience. Even the stone helps enforce this. Stone holds heat differently than air. When you sit, you feel temperature through the surface, not just through the room. Warmth is not abstract, it is physical. It meets you wherever your body touches the place. As you move deeper, the warmth becomes more deliberate. A doorway leads into air that feels heavier, and you notice it in the first breath. Moisture increases. Sound changes slightly because people speak even more quietly in hotter air, and because echoes soften when the atmosphere is thicker. This is often the hottest zone of the bathhouse, the place where the body begins to sweat again, but in a different way than outside. Outside, sweat can feel like effort. Here, sweat can feel like release. The body is no longer pushing against the day. It is letting go of it. Heat does something simple and powerful. It makes it easier to stop holding tension. Muscles that stayed tight for hours can finally relax because warmth reduces the sense of strain. The body is not solving a problem, it is being supported by the environment. Breathing changes here too. In hotter rooms, breath can become slower and more careful. You do not take large, hurried breaths. You take steady ones. This naturally slows thought, not because you are trying to meditate, but because the body chooses efficiency. If you listen closely, you might hear this change in others as well. Fewer sharp noises, less quick movement. The bathhouse becomes a place where people move as if they have time, even if they have been tired all day. This is where the idea of time without clocks returns, but in a new form. In earlier episodes, time was felt through light, work, and the body's natural rise and fall. Here, time is felt through heat. A person stays until the warmth has done what it needs to do. A pause here is not a pause from life, it is part of life. You might sit, you might stand still, you might say a few words, or you might do nothing but exist in the temperature, letting the body adjust without force. In many Roman bathing routines, people used oil and scraping as part of cleaning. You do not need a technical explanation to feel what this means. Heat loosens what the day has left behind. Oil changes how skin feels. Scraping removes the layer of sweat, dust, and oil together. The result is not modern freshness, it is relief and lightness. You can imagine small, practical gestures, a little oil on the skin, a tool used carefully, not aggressively. The sound is subtle, a faint scrape, a soft wipe with cloth. These actions are repetitive and ordinary, not theatrical. In a modest bathhouse, the tools and materials are simple. Nothing is designed to look luxurious. Clay containers, plain cloth, a small strigil in the hand. The routine is not about display, it is about function. Even if there is conversation, it tends to follow the environment. The hotter rooms do not invite constant talking. They invite shorter exchanges, pauses, and shared quiet. People do not need to entertain one another. The heat does the work. When the body begins to feel fully warmed, it is natural to move again. The bathhouse is not meant to trap you in one temperature. It is meant to guide you forward. So you might step out from the hottest room into something gentler again. This shift can feel surprisingly pleasant. After deep heat, a merely warm room can feel cool. The skin notices contrast. Breathing becomes easier. The mind feels clearer, not because you have accomplished something, but because your body is no longer carrying the day so tightly. Here again, time is felt through change. You do not count minutes. You feel when the heat has reached its peak, and you feel when it is time to ease away from it. The body chooses the moment. In some bathhouses, the sequence ends with a cool room or a cool pool. Even if the water is not icy, the contrast is real. Coolness tightens the skin again. It closes the feeling of openness that heat creates. It makes you feel finished, in a bodily sense. But coolness is not the goal by itself. It is the final step that helps the body stabilize. Heat loosens. Coolness sets. Together they create the feeling of reset, as if the day has been rinsed off not by speed, but by sequence. A cool space can also bring sound back into sharper focus. In cooler air, voices can feel clearer. Footsteps can feel crisper. The bathhouse does not become loud, but it becomes more defined again. You can sense the building more distinctly. This is another way the bathhouse teaches time. It does not blur the day into nothing. It changes the day's texture. Heat softens the body. Coolness gives it shape again. The movement between them makes the bath feel complete. And throughout the entire path, pauses are not treated as empty. A person sits because sitting is part of the sequence. A person stands quietly because quiet standing is part of the sequence. No one needs to justify their stillness. This is why baths fit so naturally into late-day rhythm. They provide a controlled environment where the body can slow down without falling asleep yet. The bathhouse becomes a bridge between effort and evening, not through a schedule, but through temperature. When you leave the hottest rooms behind, you often feel the difference immediately. The air outside the bathhouse might still be warm, but it is a different kind of warmth. It moves, it is not held. The body notices how contained the bathhouse had been, and because the sequence has changed your body, the outside world feels different too. The street might look similar, but you experience it with less tension. Steps feel easier, shoulders feel lower, breath feels less sharp. So the bathhouse is not only a place you go, it is a path you move through. It is warmth arranged into steps, and those steps reshape the way the day is carried in the body. In a modern routine, cleaning usually means water and soap, done quickly, often in private. In a Roman routine, especially in a modest bathhouse, cleaning could be slower and more physical. It relied on warmth, oil, and simple tools, and it happened in shared spaces where the body was treated as normal, not hidden. The first thing to keep in mind is that Roman hygiene was not designed around the idea of eliminating every trace of the body. It was designed around managing the body in the conditions people lived in. Dust, sweat, and smoke were expected. Work left residue. Heat brought sweat. The goal was not perfection. The goal was relief and comfort. Oil often played a central role. Not perfume, not luxury, just a practical substance when it was available. It helped loosen dirt and sweat, changed the feel of the skin, and made the next steps easier. It did not clean in the way soap does, but helped lift what the day had left behind. You can imagine a small clay vessel, the kind you would see everywhere in Roman daily life. Nothing ornate, a simple container with a narrow mouth. Someone tilts it slightly, pours a small amount into a hand, and spreads it across arms, shoulders, or legs in a slow, practiced motion. There is no rush in these movements because the bathhouse is not a place for speed. The warmth has already slowed the body down. Oil is applied the same way, smoothly, repeatedly, with the kind of attention that comes from habit, not from self-consciousness. This is where the strigil enters the routine. It is a simple curved tool used to scrape the oil and loosened residue from the skin. The motion is controlled and familiar, not harsh, not dramatic, just steady strokes that follow the contours of the body. In a modest bathhouse, you would not see anything theatrical about this. It would look like brushing dust off a cloak or wiping a work surface. Practical maintenance. A person scrapes once, wipes the tool, scrapes again. The rhythm is repetitive, almost calming in its predictability. The sound is subtle. A faint scrape, softened by the warmth and the damp air. Then the soft contact of cloth as someone wipes skin or hands. These sounds do not dominate the room. They blend into the background the way footsteps and low voices do. Water still matters, but often in a different role than we expect today. It can rinse, cool, and refresh, but much of the cleaning has already happened through heat, oil, and scraping. Water becomes part of finishing the process rather than the only method. This difference is important, and it is easy to misunderstand it if we compare it too directly to modern bathing. Roman hygiene did not fail because it did not look like ours. It simply operated within different systems. Water had to be moved, heated, managed. Soap existed, but daily body washing often relied more on oil, scraping, and rinsing. The bathhouse offered a workable routine that fit the world people lived in, and because it fit the world, it could be repeated. That is the real measure of a routine in a Roman town, not whether it was perfect, but whether it could happen again and again without breaking the household's rhythm or exhausting resources. The bathhouse floor would often tell its own story of repetition, stone or tile, slightly damp in places, not flooded, not chaotic, but marked by constant use, footprints, thin films of water, the occasional drip, surfaces that had been walked on by hundreds of bodies over years. You might notice the feeling of the floor under your feet more here than anywhere else. Warm stone in one room, cooler stone in another, a slightly slick patch near a basin. The body learns to move more carefully without being told, adjusting step by step. Objects appear as quiet parts of the routine. A bench where people sit to rest between steps. A hook or ledge where cloth is kept nearby. A clay bowl set down and picked up again. Nothing is decorative. Everything is meant to be used. Cloth matters too, not fluffy towels, but simple fabric. Wiping, drying, folding, the cloth absorbs moisture and oil. It becomes part of the routine's rhythm. Use, wipe, fold, set aside. The same gestures repeated without thought. If you pay attention to smell, it is not a cloud of fragrance. It is a mix of ordinary things: warm stone, damp air, a hint of oil, the faint trace of smoke that clings to people who live near hearths and fires. Human presence, but softened by heat and water, rather than sharpened by perfume. Even the air itself feels different during this stage. In the warmer rooms, moisture holds close. It makes the skin feel less tight. In cooler spaces, air feels clearer, and the body notices the contrast more sharply. The bathhouse offers these shifts without needing to explain them. Because this cleaning routine is physical, it also changes how tiredness feels. Dirt and sweat are not only things on the skin. They can feel like weight. When they are removed, the body often feels lighter in a small but noticeable way, as if the day has been reduced. This is one reason bathhouses belong naturally to late afternoon or early evening for many people. Not because of a clock, but because this is when the body wants relief. Work has left its traces, muscles have carried load, skin has collected dust. The bathhouse offers a way to step into the next phase of the day without dragging all of that forward. In a small-town bathhouse, the process would not necessarily be perfectly standardized. Some people would do more steps, some less, some would linger, some would keep it brief. The routine had structure, but it also had flexibility, because it had to serve many lives. And that flexibility is part of why it can feel calm. When a routine is familiar but not strict, it does not create pressure. It allows you to move at the speed your body prefers. It allows pauses without embarrassment. It allows silence without awkwardness. The bathhouse also creates a subtle kind of equality in this moment. People arrive with different work days, different roles, different degrees of fatigue, but the routine is the same. Oil, heat, simple tools, small gestures repeated. The day is removed in similar ways no matter who you are. There is no need to judge it through modern standards. The point is atmosphere and experience. A body that has been in effort moves into maintenance. A mind that has been holding tasks can loosen. The bathhouse does not require you to be impressive. It only requires you to follow the sequence. And when you finish this stage, when the oil has been scraped away, when skin feels lighter, when hands feel clean, you often notice a quiet satisfaction that has nothing to do with luxury. It is the feeling of being reset enough to continue. That reset enough to continue is where water becomes more than a practical element. After warmth and scraping, water feels like the part of the routine that confirms the change. It does not have to be dramatic, and it does not have to be perfectly clean in a modern sense. It simply feels like a new layer of the day has been reached. In a modest provincial bathhouse, water would rarely be silent. Even when no one was speaking, you would still hear it. A drip from a spout, a small pour into a basin. The soft disturbance of a surface as someone steps in or shifts their weight. These sounds form a steady background that never fully disappears. The important thing is that the sound of water is not noise in the sharp, irritating sense. It has pattern, it repeats. It behaves predictably, and because it repeats, the mind stops checking it. It becomes the kind of sound that supports rest rather than interrupts it. You might hear the smallest rhythms first, water falling at an uneven pace into stone, a shallow ripple that fades and returns, a faint splash that is immediately absorbed by the room's damp surfaces. The bathhouse holds these sounds in a way the street does not. Stone changes the acoustic character of everything. Footsteps become clearer, but also slower. The room carries echoes, yet those echoes are usually soft because voices are not shouted and movement is controlled. Even when several people are present, the overall feeling can remain restrained. This is one of the quiet differences between a bathhouse and the open town. Outside, sound spreads and mixes with wind, carts, animals, and distance. Inside, sound is contained. It reflects, but it also becomes stable. You are not hearing 100 different layers, you are hearing a smaller set of repeating elements. Water is often the most stable element of all. People come and go and conversations begin and end, but the sound of water stays. That consistency matters for tired minds. When the environment offers a constant signal that nothing urgent is happening, the nervous system begins to downshift. If you think back to the episode on sound in Roman life, the bathhouse fits that same principle. Calm does not have to mean silence. Calm can mean predictability. A bathhouse is noisy in a gentle, contained way, and that kind of noise can be easier to rest inside than a quiet space where every small sound feels sharp. There is also the specific quality of water sound that changes how time feels. A drip does not suggest minutes or hours, it suggests continuity. A small flow does not progress, it simply continues, and the mind can follow it without effort. You might notice how quickly your attention becomes less focused, not because you are distracted, but because nothing in the soundscape demands concentration. The body is warm, the skin feels lighter, the air is damp enough to soften the edges of sensation. Water adds a layer of gentle motion to that environment. In a modest bathhouse, the water itself would not always be abundant. It would be managed. It would be portioned into basins. It would be carried in a controlled way. But even controlled water creates small, repeating sounds, and those sounds are often enough to shape mood. A shallow pool does not need to be large to change the atmosphere. Even a small body of water alters the room's feeling. It holds temperature. It reflects light in subtle, moving patterns. It adds quiet motion to a space made mostly of stone and stillness. Light and water together create a specific calm. In a bathhouse, light often enters through limited openings. When it hits water, it becomes softer, less direct. It creates small reflections that drift across walls or ceilings. Nothing is bright. Nothing is sharp. The movement is slow enough that it feels accidental. This is one reason fatigue can melt in a place like this, even when it is not quiet. The environment gives the mind something steady to rest on. Warmth reduces tension. Water sound repeats. Light moves slowly. The body receives the same signals again and again. Nothing urgent, nothing sudden, nothing demanding. Footsteps remain part of this soundscape, but they rarely feel aggressive. Wet stone changes the way people move. Steps become careful. People place their feet rather than striking the ground. The sound is softer and it carries less urgency than the hard, dry sound of street walking. Sometimes you might hear a brief scrape of a stool or the quiet contact of a bowl being set down. These are not disruptive. They are signals of ordinary routine continuing. The bathhouse is not a stage. It is a working environment that happens to support rest. Voices fit into this in a particular way. In many places, voices mean interaction, obligation, attention. In a bathhouse, voices can function more like orientation. You hear that people are present, you register tone, you sense distance. But you do not always need to respond. In a smaller town, conversation might be brief and practical. A greeting, a small comment about the day's heat, a quiet exchange about someone's work. Then silence returns without discomfort, because the routine does not require constant talk to fill space. This is one of the reasons the bathhouse can feel socially safe, even for people who do not want to socialize. Presence is normalized. People share the space because they share the routine. Interaction can happen, but it is not always demanded. The architecture supports this. Rooms are arranged so that people can be near one another without being face-to-face in constant conversation. Someone sits to one side, resting. Someone moves past toward a basin. Someone else adjusts their cloth. Bodies share space without needing to perform friendliness. The bathhouse also contains sound in a way that makes voices less sharp. Moist air absorbs edges. Stone reflects, but it does not amplify like a hard, dry courtyard. Voices often arrive as low, blended tones rather than distinct, demanding speech. You might notice how quickly words become less important than sound quality. You may not catch every phrase, and that does not matter. The brain does not strain to interpret. It simply receives the fact that voices are present and that they are not urgent. Water helps with that too. A steady background sound makes speech less intrusive. It creates a soft masking effect where conversation becomes part of the environment rather than a signal that you must participate. This is one reason people can rest in shared places more easily than we might assume. This is also where repetitive rhythm becomes the key to recovery. The bathhouse does not offer a single restful moment. It offers a sequence of repeated experiences: warmth, water, sitting, moving, pausing. Each step is simple. Each step is familiar. Over time, repetition does more than clean the body, it calms it. The body responds to repeated sequences with reduced alertness. When you know what happens next, the mind stops scanning, it stops preparing, it stops bracing. This is true even if the space contains sound and movement. So fatigue softens not because the bathhouse is silent, but because it is predictable. The noises you hear are expected, the footsteps are ordinary, the drips and splashes are constant. Nothing indicates danger, nothing indicates urgency. Even small unpredictabilities are contained within a stable frame. A laugh might happen, then fade. A louder voice might echo briefly, then settle. A door might open and close. These events do not disrupt the bathhouse's rhythm, because the rhythm is stronger than any single moment. And for many people, that rhythm would have been familiar across years. They knew the room's echo. They knew where the water sounds gathered. They knew how voices carried. Familiarity turns sound into reassurance, because it becomes part of the definition of normal. If you imagine someone arriving tired from work, this matters deeply. The body may still be tense, the mind still holding the day's tasks. But the bathhouse offers signals that do not match that tension. Warmth says release. Water says continue. Repetition says you are safe to slow down. Even the way people move contributes to this. In a bathhouse, movement is often slower than in the street. People are warm, damp, relaxed. They sit more. They pause more. That creates a social tempo that is naturally less sharp. And when the social tempo is slower, sound becomes less sharp too. A room where people are rushing is louder even if no one speaks. A room where people are pausing is quieter even if water is dripping and voices are present. This is why rest can exist inside a noisy place. The brain is not only responding to volume, it is responding to pattern, predictability, and pace. A bathhouse can have constant sound and still feel like recovery because the sound matches a slow environment. Water also creates a sense of time that is not measured. Outside, the day might be felt through shadows lengthening and light cooling. Inside, time can be felt through temperature, dampness, and the body's changing comfort. Water becomes part of that internal clock. You do not need to know how long you have been there. You know that your skin feels different. You know that breath feels easier. You know that shoulders feel lower. The sound of water continues while these changes happen, marking nothing except continuity. And when you begin to feel ready to leave, that readiness often arrives quietly. It is not announced by anyone. It is not triggered by a schedule. It arrives as a bodily sense that enough has happened, that the day has been reduced and that the evening can now continue more lightly. So in this segment of the bathhouse routine, water and sound work together. Water changes the body, sound changes the mind. Neither needs to be perfect and neither needs to be silent. They simply need to be stable enough that tiredness can stop resisting. That point, when tiredness stops resisting, is also when other people become easier to be around. The body feels less defended, the mind is less sharp-edged, and because of that, the social atmosphere of the bathhouse can feel restful even when it is shared. In the movies, baths are often staged like a party or a performance. There is constant laughter, exaggerated luxury, and the sense that everyone is either showing off or being entertained. In an ordinary provincial bathhouse, it would usually feel less like that. It would feel more like a shared routine that happened in public. People were there because the day had happened to them in similar ways. Work had been done. Dust had gathered. Fatigue had settled into shoulders and legs. The bathhouse was simply one of the places where that could be released, and the presence of others was part of the system, not an extra event layered on top. This is why it can help to think of social mixing here as organic, not theatrical. People do not arrive to socialize, they arrive to bathe, and social contact happens because bathing is shared. Conversation is available, but it is not compulsory, and it does not need to be sustained to feel normal. In a small town, you would also recognize that many faces repeat. The bathhouse is not infinite, the town is not infinite. Even if you do not know everyone closely, you begin to recognize bodies, voices, and patterns. Familiarity builds quietly, and that familiarity reduces the pressure to perform. A person might nod, someone might exchange a short greeting, someone might comment briefly on the heat, the weather, or a shared local detail. Then the routine continues. The exchange can end naturally without awkwardness, because neither person has invited the other into a separate social situation. They are simply coexisting inside the same sequence. This is one of the most calming forms of social contact. It does not demand a persona. It does not demand energy. It does not require you to be interesting. You can be tired and ordinary and still belong in the space without explanation. You might notice the small ways people communicate without speaking much. A pause to let someone pass. A slight shift to make room on a bench. A careful placing of a bowl or cloth so it does not disturb someone resting nearby. These gestures are not formal politeness. They are practical cooperation in shared space. Because the bathhouse is built for repeated use, it also teaches a kind of social pacing. People move in expected ways. They do not rush through narrow points. They do not interrupt the flow with sudden changes. The architecture encourages a steady tempo, and when the tempo is steady, social contact becomes softer. It is also important to acknowledge that status differences existed. Roman society was not socially flat, and people did not step into a bathhouse and become equal in every sense. But in a modest provincial setting, much of what you feel in the moment is not hierarchy as an abstract idea. It is simply proximity. Different kinds of people share the same basic physical needs. Heat affects everyone. Fatigue affects everyone. The sequence of rooms affects everyone. Even if some arrive with more leisure and others arrive with heavier work behind them, the building receives bodies in the same practical way. That shared physical sequence can soften the social edges, at least temporarily. Not because social reality disappears, but because the body's experience becomes the foreground. When you are warm, when breath is easier, when skin feels lighter, social tension often loses some of its grip. In a modest complex, the atmosphere would likely be more restrained than in the grand urban complexes people imagine. Spaces may be smaller, the number of people present at once may be limited, and because the building is not trying to impress, behavior is not pushed into spectacle. Some people will talk, but often in short, low exchanges, a couple of sentences, a shared remark. Then silence. The sound of water and movement fills the gaps, so nobody has to fill them with words. Silence can exist without implying discomfort. This is what quiet presence really means here. It is the ability to be among people without feeling obligated to interact continuously. You are not isolated, but you are also not required to engage. You can drift in and out of attention the same way you drift in and out of warmth. There is also a particular kind of observation that happens in shared spaces like this. Not judgmental watching, but gentle noticing. You register who is present. You sense the mood. You see how others move through the sequence. This awareness is natural, and it can actually increase calm because it confirms that the environment is stable. People follow patterns, they set things down in similar ways, they move carefully on damp stone, they sit, they pause, they rise. You do not have to guess what will happen next. The collective behavior reinforces predictability. In that way, even the social layer becomes rhythmic. A voice begins, then fades. Footsteps approach, then pass. Someone settles on a bench, someone leaves a room. The crowd does not surge, it simply shifts like a slow current. For a tired mind, this can be deeply restorative. So much of modern social life feels like performance because it is often separated into designated social time. You meet someone with an agenda, or you enter a space where interaction is the point. Here, interaction is not the point. The routine is the point. That difference changes the nervous system's response. When you do not have to perform, your body stays softer. When you do not have to manage impressions, your attention can loosen. You can simply exist among others while your body completes a familiar process. Even small anxieties soften in this setting. If you are not naturally talkative, you do not have to force speech. If you are tired, you do not have to pretend you are not. If your mind drifts, the environment does not punish that. It supports it. A bathhouse also offers shared anonymity of a particular kind. In a town where everyone might recognize everyone, the bathhouse still allows privacy through routine. You can be seen without being examined. The sequence gives everyone something to do, and that something to do reduces scrutiny. It is also possible that people would keep many interactions practical. Someone asks for space. Someone indicates that an item is theirs. Someone requests help with a small task. These exchanges are functional, not social performance, and because they are functional, they do not carry emotional weight. If someone lingers in a room quietly, that can be normal too. Resting is part of the routine. Sitting without talking is not suspicious. It is simply what bodies do when they are recovering. The bathhouse provides permission for that kind of pause. This is why calling the bathhouse a party misses its ordinary reality. Yes, it can be social, and yes, some people may treat it as a place to talk. But at its core, it is a shared recovery space. Its social life is structured by repetition, not by entertainment. You might even sense a subtle cooperation between strangers. People do not need to know one another to share an environment well. They only need to respect the rhythm of the place. When that rhythm is stable, social contact becomes easier because everyone is guided by the same cues, and those cues are physical. Damp stone suggests careful movement. Warm rooms suggest slowing. Narrow thresholds suggest yielding. Benches suggest resting. When the environment guides behavior, fewer verbal negotiations are needed. Social friction decreases. This is also where the idea of small-town baths matters. In a huge city, the bathhouse might feel crowded or complex. In a provincial setting, it may feel closer to a familiar institution, like a fountain or market, something the town uses because it is there, not because it is glamorous. So being among people here does not necessarily increase stimulation. It can reduce it. You are held in a shared atmosphere that does not require constant personal output. You can be present without performing, and you can be near others without being pulled into intensity. By the time you are ready to leave, the social layer has often done something subtle. It has reminded you that you are not alone in your tiredness. You are one body among many, moving through a routine designed for bodies, not for ideals. That shared tiredness is part of why baths often sat near the end of the day. Not as a rule written anywhere, and not as a rigid appointment, but as a practical place the body could go when effort had already been spent and the mind was ready to stop holding the day so tightly. In a Roman town, evening did not begin at a number. It began when the demands of the day started to loosen. Work became less urgent, movement slowed, light softened, the air changed. The bathhouse fit naturally into that phase because it was built for transition. A bathhouse did not create leisure out of nowhere. It simply offered an environment where the body could change state. Heat, water, and routine allowed a person to move from outward effort into inward ease. That is what a bridge does. It connects two conditions without requiring a sharp break. For many people, late afternoon or early evening would have been the most sensible time to go, especially if the day involved physical work. When muscles have been used, warmth feels more valuable. When skin feels coated, cleaning feels more necessary. When the mind is full of small tasks, repeating a familiar sequence can feel like relief. But it is important not to imagine a single, uniform pattern. Some people would go earlier, some later. Some when work ended suddenly, some when it dragged on. Some would bathe more often, some less. What remains consistent is not timing, but the feeling. Baths suited the part of the day when the body wanted to stop pushing. The bathhouse also aligned with how Roman homes worked. Many ordinary houses did not provide a comfortable private place to wash thoroughly, warm the body, and then rest in a controlled environment. The bathhouse offered that controlled environment for a while, then released you back into the town with a different body, and that difference is worth staying with. After bathing, people often felt warmer, heavier, and quieter. Not heavy in a negative sense, but in the sense that the body had been softened and filled out by heat. Muscles feel less tight. Skin feels less tense. Breath feels slower without needing to be managed. There is a particular calm that comes after heat. It is not the calm of silence. It is the calm of reduced resistance. The body has stopped bracing. It no longer expects effort immediately. Even if the street outside is still active, you carry less urgency into it. This is one reason baths work so well as a bridge. They change the internal pace, even if the external pace has not fully changed yet. A town might still have footsteps, voices, and late movement, but the person leaving the bathhouse experiences those things differently. The air outside can feel cooler than it is, simply because the body has been warmed deeply. The surface of the skin senses contrast. The mind registers the open air as spacious. Even ordinary street sounds can feel softer because the bathhouse has trained attention into a steady background rhythm. You might also notice a shift in how you walk. Steps become less sharp. Shoulders drop slightly. Hands feel cleaner and more relaxed. The day has not disappeared, but its grip has loosened. The bathhouse has done its work without requiring you to think your way into calm. This is also why baths could sit between work and home without feeling like an extra chore. They were not an additional demand, they were a reduction of demand. You entered the bathhouse with the day on your body and you left with less of it. For some people, the bathhouse might also have reduced the friction of returning home. When the body is still tense and dirty from labor, the household can feel like another place where you must perform tasks. When the body has softened, the same household can feel more manageable. Even small domestic activities change under that influence. Carrying something feels easier, sitting down feels more complete, eating feels more satisfying, conversation feels less effortful. The bathhouse does not create these effects as a philosophy. It creates them as a physical consequence of warmth, water, and repetition. And in a series about rhythm, this is exactly the kind of detail that matters. The day does not end, it shifts. The bathhouse is one of the places designed to help that shift happen without needing to be announced. Even the decision to leave the bathhouse often reflects this. You do not leave because a bell rings. You leave because your body tells you the sequence is complete. You feel ready. Enough has happened. The day has been reduced to something you can carry quietly. As you step back into the street, you might see the town in a slightly different mood. Shadows are longer, light is less direct, shops may be closing or becoming quieter. People move with less urgency. None of this has a clean border. It is gradual, like the bathhouse itself. This gradualness is the beginning of evening. Not the clock's idea of evening, but the body's. When the body stops expecting high output, evening begins. The bathhouse helps produce that condition, even while the sun is still present. It is also possible that bathing changed appetite and thirst. Heat can bring hunger into focus, or delay it briefly, or make a simple drink feel restorative. Again, not as a schedule, but as a bodily consequence. After warmth and water, the body tends to want something steady and ordinary. And because Roman meals were not always rigidly defined, the bathhouse did not need to align with a fixed dinner hour. A person might eat before bathing or after, or later at home, depending on household rhythm. The important point is that bathing created a soft pause between work and whatever came next. In that pause, the nervous system learns something. It learns that the day can stop asking. It learns that effort can be put down temporarily. It learns that recovery can begin before sleep. This is why baths can feel like a bridge into the quieter part of life. So when we imagine the bathhouse as an evening bridge, we do not imagine a town moving like a machine from one programmed stage to another. We imagine a human world where demands rise and fall, and where people use stable places to help the body follow that rise and fall without strain. The bathhouse is one of those places. It receives tired bodies. It guides them through warmth and water. It returns them to the town with less tension in the muscles and less urgency in the mind. When you step out of the bathhouse, the town is still there. The street has the same stone underfoot, the same walls, the same doorways and corners. But the body that meets it is different, and that difference changes everything that follows. The air outside can feel cooler, even if the day is still warm. Your skin notices movement again. Breeze, open space, the slight dryness after damp rooms. It is not a shock. It is a gentle contrast that makes the outside world feel wider and less contained. Sound changes too. Inside the baths, water and echoes held everything close. Outside, sound spreads. Voices are more scattered, footsteps less rhythmic, and the town feels less like one shared chamber and more like many small lives moving separately. But because your body is softer, those scattered sounds do not pull as hard on attention. You can hear them without needing to respond to them. The day still exists around you, but it asks less from you now. Walking home after the baths often feels slower without feeling delayed. Not because you are trying to take your time, but because nothing inside you is pushing forward urgently. The mind is no longer braced against the next task. The body is warmer, heavier, and more settled. In a provincial town, the route home might be familiar down to small details. The bend where the light fades first. The patch of stone that holds warmth longer. The doorway that always smells faintly of smoke. These details become more noticeable when the nervous system is quiet enough to register them. You may also feel a kind of internal silence that does not depend on external quiet. The town can still be active, but the mind is not collecting every signal. That is one of the hidden effects of bathing. It does not remove the world. It changes how loudly the world lands. As you approach home, evening often feels closer, even if the sky still has light. Not because time has moved faster, but because the body has moved into a different state. It is easier to imagine resting when muscles have already been softened once. At the threshold of the house, the contrast is subtler than the bathhouse threshold. The home is not as warm, the air is more ordinary, but because you have been warmed, the home can feel gentler than it would have earlier in the day. Inside, the same surfaces greet you. Stone floors that hold coolness, plaster walls that reflect light softly, familiar objects placed where they usually belong, but they feel less demanding now because you are not entering them in a state of effort. Often the first routines after returning are small and practical. Cloth is folded, a container is set down, something is hung or placed aside. These actions are not a new set of tasks. They are a quiet way of rejoining the household without needing a conversation. Lamplight may already be present, or it may appear soon after. It does not announce itself with brightness. It gathers in one part of the room, creating a small zone where the evening can happen without needing the whole house to be fully lit. This kind of light changes behavior naturally. Hands move more carefully. People sit rather than stand. Voices lower because distance shrinks. The environment begins to do what it always does in the evening. It reduces what is required. Food, if it appears, is often simple. Not a performance and not necessarily a single formal meal. Bread, fruit, something warm if it has been prepared, something stored if it has not. The point is not abundance. The point is steadiness. After the baths, hunger can feel clearer and less restless. The body is not distracted by the discomfort of sweat and dust. Appetite becomes quieter, more direct. You eat because you need to, not because you are rushing to finish the day. Eating also tends to be slower when the body is warm. Bites are taken without urgency. There is less grabbing, less tension in the hands. Even if conversation happens, it does not need to be continuous. Silence can sit comfortably beside the sound of small eating. Objects are often returned to place gradually, not through a strict clean-up routine. A bowl rinsed, a cloth set aside, a tool moved off a surface. The house does not reset in one big gesture. It eases toward order in small steps. If others are present, the feeling is often one of parallel calm. People share space without needing to coordinate tightly. One person sits. Another moves slowly. Someone prepares something small. Someone else simply rests. The home holds different speeds at once. Children, if they are part of the household, may feel the difference immediately. Adults return with lower energy, warmer bodies, and softer attention. The house becomes less active without anyone declaring it. Children respond to the environment rather than to instructions. The street outside may still carry noise, but inside the home, sound becomes more contained. Not silent, but closer. Footsteps are fewer, voices are lower. The small impacts of objects being set down become part of a quieter rhythm. This is also where the baths show their purpose most clearly. The bathhouse did not replace the home. It prepared the body to experience the home as calmer. It reduced friction, so ordinary domestic life could feel less like another layer of effort. And because Roman life was not arranged around strict schedules, this transition did not need to be timed perfectly. It did not matter if you arrived home earlier or later. What mattered was that the day's demand had changed, and the body could finally meet the evening without resisting it. Over time, routines like this become deeply familiar. The body recognizes the sequence: heat, water, leaving, returning, soft light, simple food, objects put back. Familiarity makes rest more likely because it removes uncertainty. Nothing dramatic has to happen for recovery to begin. It begins in the way a doorway feels after warmth. It begins in the way lamplight reduces the room. It begins in the way the hands move more slowly because they no longer have to work at full strength. And this is the key feeling to carry into the close of the segment. Rest did not arrive because the town became silent or because everything became perfect. It arrived because the body had been changed enough that the evening could hold it. That shift is what stays with you most. Not a single image and not a single dramatic moment, but the way the day becomes easier to carry when effort has been reduced in the body first. The town may still be present outside, but inside the home, the world has already narrowed into softer demands. And when we look back over what the bathhouse has done, it is surprisingly simple. It has taken the ordinary weight of dust, sweat, and fatigue, and it has answered it with a routine built out of stone, water, and temperature. Nothing about it needed to be rare or luxurious to be effective. It only needed to be repeatable. A modest bathhouse in a provincial town did not promise perfection. It did not offer private silence or carefully designed comfort. It offered something more practical and often more calming, a stable sequence that the body could recognize without thinking. Doorways, changing air, warm rooms, cooler rooms, water sounds that did not stop, and the familiar feel of stone underfoot. That is why the calm of the bathhouse is not the calm of emptiness. It is the calm of predictability. The place holds steady even when people come and go. The steps remain the same even when the day has been different. And for tired bodies, that steadiness is often enough to let tension release without being forced. The bathhouse also fit naturally into Roman life because it did not demand a strict schedule. You did not go because a clock told you to. You went because the day had reached a certain phase and your body could feel that it was ready to shift. In that sense, bathing belonged to the same world as all the other routines we've explored on this channel. Work that eased gradually, evenings that gathered slowly, and rest that arrived through softening rather than control. If we reduce the experience to its essentials, we can see why it mattered so widely. Warmth changed how fatigue felt. Water changed how the skin felt. Repetition changed how the mind felt. None of those changes required silence, luxury, or spectacle. They required a place that behaved the same way again and again until the nervous system trusted it. And once that trust is present, the rest of the evening becomes easier. The home feels gentler. Food tastes simpler and steadier. Light feels softer. Hands move more slowly. Not because life has been escaped, but because life has been slowed down enough to be held. Roman baths were not about escaping life. They were one of the ways life slowed down. Warmth, water, and repetition did the work quietly. Good night.